Hi there, my name's Angus. Welcome to this video blog about the placebo and the nocebo effect. A fascinating area that is all about what is going on in here has a far more profound effect on our health than really most of us could imagine. Many people have heard of many of you will have heard of the placebo effect and possibly the nocebo effect, its evil brother, which I'll talk about later. Many of you have heard about it, but what I think is less well known, I certainly didn't know this before I started looking into it, was how much data there is on how strong this effect is. And because this data is so compelling, I feel that I have to share it. I have to share it with somebody, and why not you? So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the placebo effect, how state of mind can have a positive effect on on our health, and the opposite, the nocebo effect, which is how when we can influence our health in a negative way. Because of what we have in our head. And one of the ideas that I'm going to come back to again a couple of times during this video to help you digest the idea, I guess, so that it can live with you, perhaps a little bit more strongly, is that this idea of a seesaw. As kids, we love rocking on a seesaw, going up and down, up and down, up and down. And by the end of this video, I think you'll become aware of how much you can affect your health up and down, up and down. This is going to be the positive side here for me, and this is going to be the negative side. But how you can steer yourself to better health through your thinking. This doesn't mean that thinking is going to be the cure of all ills. Certainly not. Without going into any details at all, modern medicine has provided us with so many cures there that to dismiss that and just say all you need to focus on your mind is in my view unrealistic. But what has been underestimated by modern medicine up until fairly recently is how much the mind really is engaged in the process of health, whether we feel healthy or unhealthy. And that's what I want to tell you more about in this video. So here I have a book called The Emperor's New Drugs by Irving Kirsch, and who is a researcher, I believe, still at Hull University in the UK. A great book for getting a deeper understanding of the placebo effect, how it might work, how it challenges many of our assumptions, but as is key here. How much research there is on it, how real this effect is. It isn't mumbo jumbo, it isn't wishy-washy thinking. This is backed up by a lot of data. There is another book which I've also read on the subject. This is Placebo by Dylan Evans, who also has his own website. Both of these books have been instrumental in me gaining a more informed picture of what the research shows us, and I would recommend anybody who's interested, who wants to be persuaded by the reality of this, that they look at both these books and the bounty of stuff that is online as well. So my first story comes from Kirsch's book, and Before I tell the story, need to make clear a concept called double blind. What is double blind when we are talking about research into how effective drugs are? A double blind is the idea that neither the patient nor the doctor administering the medicine knows whether they've got the real medicine or not. And when any new drug is brought to market, it has to demonstrate that it's better than placebo, i.e. a sugar pill or a saline solution, but something that has no active medical ingredients, or it has to be better than a current drug on the market. But we're focusing on the placebo. So what Kirsch does is he details how they were looking through the data. They were trying to work out how effective is the placebo in healing, and specifically, this is specifically about depression. Other studies, other researchers, let's say the placebo effect can be anywhere between 30 and 90%. We're going of any drug's efficacy. But what Kirsch did, he looked at data to try and work out, okay, so how strong is this placebo effect? And there are three components, if you like, to the healing process, or to overcoming depression. One is time. Just the fact that the clock keeps ticking means that 25%, these are the figures, this is the figure that he arrived at as a result of meta-analysis, looking at studies about studies, compiling all the data together and seeing if you can statistically say anything about that. And so what they found is 25% of the time, if you'd have just left the depressed people alone, then they'd have healed themselves. A further 50% seemed to be healed by the placebo effect, i.e. it didn't make any difference whether they got in medication. They did need some sort of help. It was a lot better than just time itself, than no action, but 50% of the time placebo seemed to add it. And then the 25% was the effect of the real drug, or at least so they thought. Several things made them suspicious about this figure of 24 to 26% he talks about in the book. Because what they found is that it seemed no matter what type of drugs they were using to cure people of depression, they always seemed to fall within this narrow band. And eventually they started considering the idea, could it be that even what seems to be the remaining effect, the top 25%, the remaining effect of the active drug, that indeed was placebo itself. And one of the reasons they came to this conclusion, or that they started investigating this, was because what they also found out in their research is that people were particularly good at working out whether when they were on these drug trials, whether they had actually received the real drug or the placebo. And if you are going to take part in a drug trial, you give your consent to say, I realise that I might get the real deal, or I might just get a sugar pill, and I'm okay with that. So imagine you're depressed. Don't imagine it too hard because it might come true. But imagine briefly you're depressed, and perhaps you've been depressed before. And you go on one of these drug trials, and you're looking for a solution. You're looking for a medication that's going to help you get over your depression. One of the first questions you're likely to ask yourself in that drug trial is, well, did I get the real thing, or did I get the sugar pill? And what they found is that people were remarkably good at guessing whether they'd got the real deal or not. And this is attributed to the fact that people were gauging it based on whether they were getting side effects or not. So essentially, whether these people, even though the studies were so-called double blinds, people were able to break this double blind. So they were no longer guessing, they were already sure. So like somewhere between 80 and 90% of the people were sure when they were actually getting a real drug. And the consequences it's had on the trial is that, okay, so it's no longer a double blind. But it also threw up this question. So if they're going on, if it's side effects are convincing them they got the real drug, then perhaps that is actually contributing to the placebo effect. And they found that also there was an extremely high correlation, 0.96, which is it's almost perfect correlation between the amount of side effects people get and how effective an antidepressant was, how effective the drug was. And this added further fuel to the idea that actually, so that it's the perceived, that there's something else going on here. So they were interested in looking at, is there any way of getting people to believe they're getting a real new trial drug when they're still only getting a placebo? So what they did is they found some studies where atropine had been added to placebos. So atropine is a drug that's used, it's for people with gastric, with stomach problems. Absolutely, it should have no impact on what's going on up here. But it does have these side effects of perhaps feeling slightly nauseous, dry mouth, diarrhea, these type of side effects, which are also amongst the side effects that you can get when you take an antidepressant. So what they were doing is they were, if you like, fooling people into believing that they were getting the real drug, or making them believing more strongly that they were getting a real drug. And this is when the biggest shock happened for the researchers, because what they then saw is that there was statistically no difference between the latest and the greatest drugs, these drugs that require billions and billions of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever your currency is, to be developed, and yet they are no better than a sugar pill. And they gave this name, they gave the name active placebo to this type of placebo where you've fooled people into believing they got the real pill when they didn't. So we've got this idea of there's a regular placebo with no side effects, and then there's the active placebo, which enhances the ability. Remember, no medication involved here. What's happened is in your mind, you're more convinced you've got a drug. On our seesaw, it's as if we can go, just by thinking about it, we can go even higher. We can get an even stronger effect just by thinking about it. We go further, and that is really strange that we can deceive ourselves, and then we can deceive ourselves even more strongly. But deception usually has this connotation that's like it is something negative, understandably, if you deceive somebody else. But here, this deception is actually working in your favor. So it somehow seems wrong to use the word deception here. So let's perhaps talk about it in terms of strength of belief. So like your strength of belief in something will determine how real it is. I mean, it sounds like science all back to front, and it's like it sounds like an affront to science. But this is the reality we have to deal with. But here we're also like we seem to be living in this world where we sort of like thought there was an objective reality outside, and I just have to observe it and start to see what the truth is. But with things like placebo, and perhaps it's quantum world as well, but with the placebo, what we find is, no, it isn't as simple as that. Yeah, sure, there's a world outside there, but the content of my mind, how I choose to see the world, will determine how that world acts. And in that sense, it's breaking down this idea that there's an objective truth out there, and I just have to I just have to be a passive observer and watch it. It's suggesting that no, that we can no longer hold to that. Passive observer, if you like, doesn't exist. And then the questions become okay, so perhaps which are more valuable beliefs for me to have? Okay. Final point on this before I move over to placebo, a little segue here is a lot of research, around about 168,000 studies, according to one piece of one information source I read. 168,000 different studies have been done where the placebo effect has been demonstrated. Okay, and has been seen to have an effect that is real. And then on the other side we have this nocebo effect, which is very which I didn't even know about until recently. But it's the opposite idea of placebo. Placebo is it literally means I shall please, but in medicine it's the idea that I can make myself better just by believing it, by taking a pill and believing that it's going to make me better. But the nocebo effect is the opposite. It is the idea that if I believe that something is going to harm me, even if it shouldn't harm me because it's just a sugar pill or it's a saline solution, if I believe it strong enough or to varying levels, then it is more likely that I will suffer, because nocebo means I shall harm. So 168,000 studies on the placebo side and only around about 200 studies on the nocebo side. That means, like in rough and ready figures, for every one study about nocebo, there are 840, nearly 1,000 studies demonstrating how real the placebo is. Okay, let's now move on to a couple of stories about the nocebo effect. Okay, welcome back. So this time, or now we're going to talk about some examples, some stories about the nocebo effect. And as I've already mentioned, the research on this is a lot more sparse, but there are some really compelling stories out there. And the first one I'm going to tell you about is about a drug called Elthroxin, which is a drug that is used by people with thyroid problems. And back in 2007 in New Zealand, something very strange happened. Over a period of 18 months, the side effects caused by this drug Elthroxin increased by 10,000%, 2,000-fold in the New Zealand population. So just to chew over that figure in, all of a sudden people are 2,000 times more likely to have side effects, and these could be itchy skin, pain. What were some of the others? Like nausea, eye pain. These type of things. They suddenly over this 18-month period, doctors was receiving a lot more complaints about this. And as you can imagine, I mean, this is a huge headache for the drug manufacturer. In this case, it's GlaxoSmithKline. And they tried to get to the bottom of what had caused this dramatic increase in people being negatively affected by their drug. Obviously, it's not good news for them. What had happened is GlaxoSmith, GSK, they had moved production of this drug from Canada to Germany. But basically, biomedically, the pill was identical to the one that had been selling for decades in New Zealand. Before that, they had made changes to the packaging and to the side effects leaflet that went with it, as they'd sort of like gathered more data on it. So they were faced with this. We have biomedically the identical product, and nevertheless 2,000 times more people complaining of negative side effects or side effects from this drug. And what they did is, when they went into research to find out how this had come about, they began to see that it seemed to be linked to negative media coverage, and that they could actually isolate or identify different regions in New Zealand where negative media coverage had been intensive or extensive. Then there was a greater prevalence of people reporting negative side effects. So that's one example of the nocebo effect, how people are influenced by the media or by the message that are given about a drug, which seems to amplify, in this case, the negative effects. And once figures of authority, in this case the media, are spreading that message, then it can have really dramatic effects. Other studies that demonstrate this powerful effect. Another example of the nocebo, which was documented by Fielding, was people being treated for stomach cancer. So what we had here is some people receiving placebo therapy to test this drug, of course, and what they found was that the people receiving no drug, they were getting sugar pills, they were warned about the potential negative side effects that would have been real for the real medication. And so people who got no drugs, 1/3 of the patients started developing nausea. a fifth, it's like 20% of them develop vomiting, and most visual, most graphic of all is 1/3 of them experienced hair loss. People's hair started falling out because they believed that they had taken a drug that would cause hair loss. They believed that. The reality was, so I'm laughing because then you like, so which is the reality here? Is it the belief that's shaping reality, or is it reality that the drug has no medical properties? But quite clearly it does. I hope you understand the confusion a little bit in my voice there, that it becomes problematic to talk about what is real. Okay, but this hair loss is particularly graphic, that it's their minds. It's the people's minds who are creating this hair loss because they believed the drug, which they weren't getting, might lead to hair loss. Okay. And my final story to do with nocebo is related to enlarged prostates. So again, men suffering from enlarged prostates took part in these drug trials. Some received the real medicine, some received the placebo, and even men on the placebo arm of the trial, they started having erectile problems getting erections, problems ejaculating, even though they had never taken real medication. And what is particularly striking here is, in this particular case, 44% of people receiving placebo, receiving a sugar pill, who were told that they might get erectile problems, 44% of that group got it, even though there was no medicine involved. The only medicine involved was that created in the mind. And the control group in this study, where they were not informed about the effects, about possible side effects, there the rate was only 15%. So people being told that they might suffer from erectile problems getting an erection, were 3 times more likely to have that problem because it had been suggested to them. So we've looked at the placebo effect and how startlingly we can actually increase that effect quite dramatically by making people suffer more side effects, what they think are side effects of the drugs. And particularly in the case with antidepressants, we found that basically there was no difference between that, no statistically significant difference between the latest and greatest drug and a pure placebo effect. And we called this the active nocebo. Then in the second part, we looked at the nocebo, which was firstly we looked at the experiences in New Zealand, where they had a 2,000-fold increase in side effects from a drug that was identical to one that had been sold for decades before. We looked at the chemotherapy patients who were feeling sick, but like particularly dramatic was the hair loss. I mean, it going down to, this is not just about how people feel, but it's having real physiological effects, in this case hair loss. And then we had the men with their sex problems, who were because of the beliefs that had been implanted with them, because of those beliefs, they were no longer sexually functional, or at least 44% weren't in that case. I really have only scratched the surface with these examples that I've given, and making this video has also been fun and makes me realize that I really would like to do more, because there are so many really good stories out there, but there's stories that's like enhance our perception of what we are capable of, and I think that's a deeply liberating message to send it to you. Below this video, you'll see the links, so you can see that the references to the points that I've raised, which might stimulate to read more around it, because there's a lot that wasn't covered in this video. And finally, I would like to encourage you, if you've enjoyed this video, to press like, so that it becomes easier for other people to find people who might be interested in this subject of understanding themselves a little bit better. And I'm already looking forward to doing my next video, and it has to be on this subject. There are many other subjects I'd like to cover in this mind-body question, but placebo effect feels like it needs several videos, and even then I'll fall well short. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and look forward to doing something similar in the future. And now I'll lead you over to the starlings.